I promised you no one would replace you in this house." Those were the words I whispered every night before I closed my eyes, standing in front of the framed photograph that hung above the mantel. My wife's smile, forever caught in that picture, from our 40th anniversary, had kept me company through more than a decade of silence. That promise wasn't just something I said in grief. It became the anchor of my days, the single thread that tied me to this old house and perhaps to my own sense of worth. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The house itself wasn't much to brag about, at least not in the eyes of outsiders. Folks in town called it the Harrington Place, a big brick colonial built before the Second World War. 40 years ago, when I first scraped enough together to buy it, I didn't see a building. I saw a future. White columns on the porch, a sturdy oak door, creaky stairs that sang at night. It was where Mary and I raised David, where we built Christmas mornings and Thanksgiving dinners, where neighbors would sit on the porch and share pie in the summertime. These days, I mostly rattled around alone. The fridge hummed louder than my footsteps. The tick of the old kitchen clock filled the rooms more than laughter ever did. Still, I kept everything just the way Mary left it. Her recipe cards, yellowed and smudged with flour, stacked neatly in the drawer beside the stove. Her rosary beads on the nightstand. Even her coat still hanging by the door. I couldn't bring myself to put it away. Sunday mornings gave me reason to leave. I'd drive the Buick down Maple Street to St. Andrew's, the little brick church with white shutters. The congregation there had watched me grow older, just as I'd watched them. After service, we gathered in the basement fellowship hall, folding tables lined with potluck dishes, casseroles, potato salad, apple pies. I'd sip weak coffee from a styrofoam cup, listening more than talking. They meant well when they asked how I was holding up, but grief is a long road most people tire of hearing about it. Back home, I'd sit on the porch swing with my pill organizer by my side, morning sun cutting across the lawn. The pills, little red, blue, and white ones, kept me moving, but reminded me daily that I wasn't who I used to be. A man notices the betrayals of his body long before anyone else does. Knees stiff, back sore, eyesight fading. Still, I was determined not to let any of that force me out of the house. If there was one thing I held on to, it was that I would live out my days here among the walls that knew me best. David, my boy. Well, he wasn't a boy anymore, though in my mind I still saw him in a baseball cap with freckles on his cheeks. He rarely came around these days. His wife Amanda had her opinions about this house. Too old, too drafty, too wasteful, she said. To her, it was nothing but square footage and market value. She never sat at the kitchen table with Mary's pies cooling on the sill. She never heard the floorboards upstairs creak just so when David crept in past curfew. She didn't know this house had a heartbeat. When David did call, his voice carried the tension of a man caught between two worlds. He asked if I was managing, reminded me of the offers he'd heard from realtors in town. "Dad, you'd be better off downsizing," he said, once his tone rehearsed like Amanda had fed him the line. Downsizing. That word felt like someone suggesting I cut my life in half. What they didn't understand was that a man of my age, once stripped of his home, quickly loses more than walls and roof. He loses his place in the world. So I stayed quiet. I nodded when they spoke, let them believe what they wanted. Outwardly, I was just an old man clinging to bricks and mortar. Inside, I held on to something no one else could see: Mary's presence. Call it memory, call it stubbornness, call it something spiritual. I felt her here. Sometimes in the hush of evening, I'd hear the faintest echo of her humming from the kitchen. When I walked past the piano, the same one she used to play hymns on, I swore the air changed as if the room remembered. That night after supper of baked beans and cornbread eaten at the kitchen table, I climbed the stairs slower than I used to. The hallway smelled faintly of cedar from the old chest at the end. I paused by the door of what used to be our bedroom. Her perfume still lingered even after all this time. I looked again at her photo on the mantel downstairs, replaying the words I'd promised no one would replace her here. People sometimes ask me why I never remarried. Truth is, after Mary, there was no after. She wasn't a chapter, she was the book. And this house, it was the cover holding every page we'd ever written together. It was a Tuesday evening when David finally showed up. Though he didn't come alone. I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway and peeked through the curtain just in time to see Amanda step out of the car ahead of him, heels clicking on the pavement like she owned the place already. David trailed behind his shoulders, hunched hands jammed deep into his pockets. The porch light flickered as they climbed the steps as if even the house knew what was coming. I opened the door before they knocked. My son tried to smile, but it faltered halfway. Amanda, on the other hand, gave me one of those polite grins people wear when they've already made up their minds. "We should sit down," Dad David said, his eyes darting toward the kitchen. We gathered around the oak table, the same one Mary and I had saved up for after our first Christmas here. How many meals, arguments, birthdays had it carried on its scarred surface? Tonight the air felt heavier, as though every memory leaned in to watch. "Dad, Amanda and I have been talking," David began. His voice was steady, but his hands betrayed him, fiddling with the salt shaker, turning it back and forth. Amanda leaned forward before he could continue. "This house is far too big for one man to handle. Drafty, outdated, expensive to heat. You shouldn't be alone here." Her words landed like stones in a pond, sending ripples through me. She had never spent a winter here, stoking the fireplace until the embers glowed orange, or heard Mary humming as she sewed curtains for the drafty windows. To her, it was just square footage and repair bills. David cleared his throat. "Dad, we think it's time to let it go. Amanda's parents have been looking for a place, and this would be perfect for them." There it was. No hesitation, no sugarcoating. Just the blunt truth. My son was giving away the home his mother and I had built brick by brick, memory by memory. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I stayed quiet. Words weren't ready to come. Amanda filled the silence. "Think of the relief," she said brightly. "No more shoveling snow, no more worrying about repairs. You could find a smaller place, maybe an apartment closer to town. Something easier." Her smile widened as she painted pictures of my exile. An apartment. Easier, as though a man of my age should be tucked away neatly out of sight while she and her family stretched out in the rooms Mary once decorated with her own hands. David finally looked at me, his eyes pleading. He wanted me to agree to make it simple. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the tick of the clock on the wall. My silence unnerved them more than any protest could. Amanda's foot tapped impatiently under the table. David shifted, rubbing the back of his neck. "Please, Dad," David said. "It's what's best for everyone." The betrayal in those words cut deeper than if he had shouted. Best for everyone. Everyone but me. Everyone but his mother, whose presence still lingered in every corner of this house. I folded my hands, nodding slowly as if in agreement. But inside, something ancient and unyielding stirred awake. After they drove away, I stayed at the table a long while, my palms resting flat against the worn wood. The house felt heavier than usual, like it had been holding its breath through the whole conversation. I listened to the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, the faint rattle of the furnace in the basement. Ordinary sounds, yet they pressed down on me like judgment. I finally stood, pushing the chair back with a scrape. My legs carried me through the living room, past the piano where Mary used to sit on Sunday afternoons coaxing hymns from the keys, while David pretended to sing along. I ran a hand along the lid dust clinging to my skin. In my mind, I could almost hear her voice again, soft but steady, like she was reminding me I wasn't alone. Climbing the stairs, each step groaned louder than the last. It didn't sound like age. It sounded like protest. The house had a way of speaking if you knew how to listen, and I'd spent 40 years learning its language. Tonight it seemed to ask me the very question I'd been asking myself. What now? I paused outside our old bedroom. The air there always smelled faintly of cedar from the chest at the end of the hall. I eased the door shut behind me, careful, as though I might disturb Mary's rest. Her coat still hung from the peg on the wall. I slipped my hand into the pocket and felt something crinkle. It was a scrap of paper, folded and fragile, the ink faded with time. Mary's handwriting tilted across the page in the familiar loops I could have recognized anywhere. The words were simple. "This house is our family. Never let it lose its soul." I sat down on the edge of the bed, the paper trembling between my fingers. For a moment, the years fell away, and I was young again, standing beside her as we painted the nursery, her laughter ringing off these very walls. The promise I had made her on the night she passed came back sharper than ever. No one would replace her here. "They think I'll give in. I whispered to the empty room. They think a few words about convenience and comfort can erase 40 years, but they don't understand. I slid the note back into the pocket, smoothing the fabric as though I were tucking her in for the night. Then I sat there in the dark, letting the silence settle around me. My grief was still there, raw as ever, but beneath it something else stirred, something older, fiercer, unwilling to bend. I leaned back against the headboard and closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to listen. The house creaked. The wind brushed against the shutters, and for just a second I swore I heard Mary's humming drift through the hall. My voice came out low, almost a growl, as I let the words escape into the quiet. They don't know what they've woken. The sentence hung in the air, heavier than stone, and the house seemed to breathe with me. When the moving truck rumbled up the driveway, I stood at the window with the curtain pinched between my fingers. I had lived in this house for more than 4 decades, but that morning it felt like I was trespassing in my own home. Amanda hopped out first, phone in hand, already directing the movers like a foreman. Her parents followed, dressed in their Sunday best as if this were some kind of parade. David trailed behind, shoulders tight, his eyes flicking up to the window where he must have known I was watching. Boxes spilled from the truck like floodwater. I saw them labeled in Amanda's neat handwriting: kitchen, master, bedroom, storage. Words that claimed rooms that weren't hers, not really. The movers laughed and shouted as they carried furniture up the porch steps, boots clattering across wood Mary had once polished until it shone. I felt a pinch in my chest, remembering her bent over with a rag in hand, humming under her breath, while sunlight stretched across the floor. Amanda's mother clapped her hands together, beaming. At last, she said, like they had conquered a piece of territory. She ran her hand along the banister, the same one I had sanded and stained with care, and declared it solid. Her father chuckled, calling the place a diamond in the rough. I could almost hear Mary's disapproval in my head, the way she'd purse her lips when someone reduced hard work to a trinket. I stayed silent. Silence had become my sharpest weapon. David came inside briefly, his voice low, as he asked me if I was comfortable staying in the back room for the time being. "It won't be forever, Dad," he said. "Just until we figure things out." I studied him, the boy I had raised, now a man speaking like a landlord in his own father's home. He couldn't hold my gaze for long. His eyes darted away, catching Amanda as she walked past with a vase from her mother's collection, setting it right in the middle of Mary's old sideboard, as if to stake her flag. The first meal in the house was a noisy affair. Amanda insisted on ordering takeout from a trendy restaurant in town, declaring that no one had the energy to cook. They spread cartons across my kitchen counters, the same counters where Mary had rolled pie crusts every Thanksgiving. The smell of sesame oil and fried noodles filled the air, masking the faint scent of cinnamon that still lived in the wood. Amanda's father raised a glass of soda. "To new beginnings," he said. Everyone clinked cups except me. David shot me a pleading look, but I only raised an eyebrow. I chewed my food slowly, letting the silence between us harden. Later, as the night wound down, I caught Amanda in the hallway. She was adjusting a mirror she had hung over the console table. "This place is finally going to feel alive again," she said with satisfaction. Then, almost like a taunt, she added, "No offense, but houses need young energy. They die with old habits." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I knew the house was listening. When I retreated to the back room, what they now called Dad's quarters, I lay on the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. The laughter of Amanda's parents echoed through the vents, spilling into every corner of the house. They were celebrating their victory, blind to the weight of the promise that lingered in these walls. As I drifted toward sleep, I heard the faintest sound, like the brush of fabric against wood. My eyes opened wide in the darkness. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard groaned, deliberate and slow, though everyone else was in bed. I sat up, listening. Silence returned, thick and steady. I told myself it was nothing, just the old bones of the house settling with the chill of the night. But deep down I knew better. This house had never taken kindly to strangers. The second day was louder than the first. Amanda's parents bustled through the house like inspectors, pointing out which walls should be painted, which carpets should be ripped up. Amanda scribbled notes on her tablet, already planning a renovation. David tried to keep up nodding fetching boxes, offering half-hearted smiles. I sat in the corner of the living room, newspaper in hand, though I wasn't reading a word. They moved Mary's rocking chair without asking, shoving it into the garage with the rest of the things Amanda labeled outdated. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to stay still. I wanted to snatch it back to remind them that she had spent countless evenings there knitting, but I didn't. Not yet. Amanda's father ran his palm along the fireplace mantel, the same one where Mary's photo still rested. "We'll need to modernize this whole thing," he said. "Stone veneer, maybe a mounted TV." David shifted uneasily. For a flicker of a moment, I saw the boy who used to crawl onto that hearth with his blanket watching the fire crackle. But then he swallowed it down, saying nothing, letting Amanda's parents carry on as if history itself could be bulldozed. By evening, tempers began to fray. Amanda scolded David for leaving boxes in the wrong place. Her mother criticized the movers for scratching the banister. Her father snapped about the cost of new windows. The house rang with their voices, sharp and discordant, so unlike the laughter that once filled these rooms. At dinner, they gathered around the table, my table. Amanda ordered takeout again, talking over David whenever he tried to speak. Her parents congratulated her on how quickly she was transforming the place. David finally snapped. "This isn't your house," he muttered under his breath, but loud enough for me to hear. Amanda froze chopsticks halfway to her mouth. "What did you say?" He shook his head, backpedaling. "Nothing. Just maybe we should slow down." Her parents exchanged a look, smug and dismissive. Amanda leaned closer to David, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. "You wanted this as much as I did. Don't you dare lose your nerve now." I said nothing, but I saw the storm brewing in him. He carried guilt like a stone in his pocket, heavy and unavoidable. That night, the first real sign came. Amanda was in the hallway again, fussing with the mirror she had hung earlier. She tilted it left, then right, trying to catch her own reflection just so. I watched from the doorway of the back room unnoticed. Suddenly, she froze. Her eyes widened. For an instant, her whole body stiffened. Later, she told David it was nothing, that she was just tired, but I saw it. In the glass, she had glimpsed something behind her, a figure, faint and gray hair, pale as winter frost. She whipped her head around, but the hallway was empty. Still, she shivered. She shook it off quickly, laughing a little, too loud, calling it a trick of the light. David tried to soothe her, but his own hands trembled as he took hers. From where I stood, I didn't move, didn't speak. But inside, something uncoiled. The house wasn't done speaking. I whispered to myself, too soft for anyone else to hear, "This is just the beginning." The first strange thing happened on a Wednesday night. I was in the back room trying to drift off when the light on my nightstand flickered. Once, then twice. I tapped the base out of habit, thinking it was a loose bulb. But then the ceiling light in the hallway blinked too, on and off, a quick stutter that traveled down the corridor like a ripple. From the other end of the house, I heard Amanda's muffled voice. "David, did you pay the electric bill?" I smiled to myself in the dark. The bills had been paid on time for 40 years. The wiring was old, yes, but never temperamental. Not like this. The next day, I overheard Amanda on the phone with her mother, pacing the kitchen. "The lights keep flickering." She whispered, her hand covering the receiver like she was trying to keep the walls from hearing. "It's nothing, I'm sure. Just an old house thing." David walked in halfway through the conversation. He grabbed a cup of coffee and said casually, "It's just the pipes. Old houses creak. You're overthinking it." Amanda didn't argue, but her eyes lingered on the ceiling light above them, watching as it swayed faintly, even though no breeze touched it. That night, I sat in the living room while they watched TV. The piano, silent for years, gave a single note, just one. A low C that trembled through the air. Everyone froze. Amanda's mother turned toward the instrument, her face pale. "Probably just the wood settling," David said too quickly. His voice cracked on the last word. I ran a hand across the arm of my chair, remembering how Mary's fingers had once danced across those keys, filling the house with hymns on Sunday mornings. I didn't say a word. By the third night, the disturbances grew bolder. Footsteps padded along the upstairs hallway long after everyone had gone to bed. Slow, deliberate, as if someone was circling the bedrooms. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, counting each step. I wasn't the only one. Amanda burst into the kitchen the next morning, her hair unkempt, her face pale. "Did you hear it? Tell me you heard it." David poured himself coffee, yawning. Amanda, enough. Houses settle, pipes knock, floors creak. You've got to stop working yourself up. Her hands trembled as she held her mug. I'm telling you, David. There were footsteps, right outside our door. I thought someone was in the house. David put an arm around her shoulder, but he didn't look convinced himself. His jaw was tight, his eyes tired. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the silence stretch before I said, "This house doesn't take kindly to strangers wandering the halls." Amanda looked at me sharply. David shot me a warning glance, but I only lifted my mug, letting the words hang in the air. That evening, we gathered in the dining room. Amanda's parents insisted on lighting candles because the overhead bulbs kept sputtering. The glow threw shadows against the walls, stretching them taller, twisting them into unfamiliar shapes. Midway through the meal, the piano sounded again. Not one note this time, but a chord 3 keys struck at once. The sound rang through the house, hollow and deep. Amanda gasped. Her mother clutched her napkin. Her father muttered under his breath, "What kind of nonsense?" But he didn't finish. David slammed his fork down. "Enough. It's the humidity. Old wood reacts, that's all." But his voice shook, betraying the fear he was trying to hide. I leaned back in my chair, listening. The chord still lingered in the air long after it should have faded. This house had a way of reminding people of its promises. Sleep was impossible that night. The whole house seemed alive, restless. Floorboards creaked, though no one moved. Doors rattled faintly against their frames, as if someone pressed from the other side. I lay awake staring at the shadows crawling across the ceiling. Sometime past midnight, I heard it again, the piano. This time, not a single note or a chord, but a halting melody, broken and uneven like a hand fumbling through a hymn remembered from long ago. The sound carried down the hallway clear as church bells, though no one sat at the bench. Amanda screamed. David bolted upright. I heard the shuffle of feet, the thud of someone bumping into a dresser. Then the whole family poured into the hallway, their eyes wide, their faces pale in the dim light. "Who's in there?" Amanda's father shouted at his voice shaking. He grabbed the flashlight and stormed toward the piano room, Amanda clutching his arm. But when he swung the light over the instrument, the bench was empty. The keys still quivered, though, as if touched only seconds earlier. Amanda clapped her hands over her ears. "Make it stop. Please, make it stop." David tried to soothe her, but his voice was hollow. It's just the wood, the strings reacting to the humidity." But even as he spoke, the house answered. From the upstairs nursery, a sound rose, a child's cry, thin at first, then swelling, echoing through the walls. The cry grew louder, rolling down the stairwell, filling every corner of the house. It was unmistakable. The weeping of an infant, heart-wrenching and raw. Amanda's mother dropped the flashlight, the beam spinning across the floor. Her father froze, color draining from his face. Amanda clutched David's sleeve, sobbing, "There's no baby here. Tell me there's no baby here." David stood rigid, unable to answer. His jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might snap. I stepped into the hall, leaning against the doorframe, my voice calm in the chaos. "There was once," I said softly. "This house remembers." They all turned to me, horror etched across their faces. No one dared ask what I meant. The crying swelled until it seemed the walls themselves were mourning. Then as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Silence fell heavy and absolute. Amanda collapsed against David, shaking uncontrollably. Her parents whispered hurried prayers under their breath, eyes darting to every corner. David finally found his voice rough and strained. "It's nothing. Just the house. Old houses do this." But no one believed him. Not even he believed himself. I retreated back into my room, closing the door gently behind me. On the other side, I could still hear Amanda weeping, her parents murmuring, David pacing. The house had spoken louder now, and they couldn't ignore it. I sat on the edge of my bed, the old floor creaking beneath me. For the first time in years, I felt Mary's presence as strong as if she were beside me. The promise I had made to her still pulsed through these walls, and now the house was carrying it forward. Morning crept into the house, but instead of easing the fear from the night before, it only sharpened the edges. I could hear them downstairs, voices raised, echoing through the kitchen where Mary once set out Sunday pancakes for David. Now the same space carried bitterness instead of warmth. Amanda's parents wanted out. I heard her mother, her tone sharp and cracking, say, "We're not staying another night. This place is cursed." Her father, quieter but no less firm, added, "Pack the car. I've seen enough." Amanda fought back. "You can't just run. People will talk. We finally have this house, and you want to leave like cowards." Her voice wavered between panic and pride, and though she tried to sound strong, I could hear the fear threading every word. David said nothing at first. He sat at the table, staring into a coffee cup that had long gone cold. The circles under his eyes told me he hadn't slept. His hand rubbed at his temple like the weight of both families pressed down on him. Finally, he muttered, "Maybe they're right, Amanda. Maybe we should—" She cut him off, slamming her hand against the table. "Don't you dare. Don't you even start. This is ours now. Yours. You promised me." The promise. That was what chained him. I could see it in the way his shoulders slumped. My son wasn't a fool. He had felt the same icy draft. I had heard the same impossible cries. But Amanda's words bound him tighter than any ghost could. I didn't go down right away. I stayed by the staircase, listening, letting the cracks in their voices widen. For years, silence had been my burden. Now, silence was my weapon. By noon, Amanda's parents stormed out to the porch, muttering about hotels, vowing never to spend another night under this roof. Amanda followed, begging, but they shook her off. The car engine roared. Gravel crunched, and then the sound faded down the lane. Inside, David leaned against the counter, face pale. "Amanda, I don't know how much longer I can do this." "You'll do it," she snapped, "because this house is our future. Everyone in town will know we made it here. And I will not crawl back just because of a few flickering lights and silly noises." Her defiance filled the room, but it rang hollow. Even she glanced at the corners too often, like expecting something to move. That evening, when quiet settled again, I walked through the hallways as I always did. The wallpaper was old, faded in places, but I knew every mark, every chip in the plaster. My hand brushed the wall by the staircase, and that's when I saw it. Faint, chalky lines stretched across the wallpaper. Letters forming slowly jagged, but unmistakable. My breath caught. "This is still my home." The words shone faintly white, scrawled in handwriting I knew as well as my own. Mary's. I froze, my heart hammering. Upstairs I heard a gasp. Amanda had seen it too. Amanda's scream tore through the silence. She stumbled backward from the wall, nearly knocking over a lamp. "David, do you see that? Tell me you see it?" David rushed to her side, his eyes following her trembling finger. The color drained from his face as he read the chalky words. For a long moment he didn't speak. His throat bobbed as he swallowed, hard jaw working like he was chewing gravel. It's nothing," he finally muttered, though his voice cracked. "Old stains, tricks of the light." Amanda's hands clutched his arm so tightly her nails dug into his skin. "Don't you dare dismiss this. That's handwriting. That's someone's handwriting." She broke into sobs. "It's hers, isn't it, your mother's?" David flinched at the word. "My mother?" He couldn't look at me, though he knew I was standing at the end of the hall. His eyes darted everywhere else, ceiling, floor, Amanda's face, but not mine. Amanda turned on me. Then her fear sharpened into fury. You knew this house was wrong, and you let us move in anyway. What sick game are you playing?" I didn't answer. I only looked at the words on the wall, steady and sure, like Mary herself had reached through time to write them. David stepped between us, voice low but shaking. "Stop it, Amanda. Just stop. Yelling at him won't change anything." "But he's not doing anything," she snapped. "He just stands there watching us unravel like he's enjoying it." I said nothing because silence told the truth better than the words ever could. That night, David couldn't sleep. I heard him pacing the hallway, stopping often at the spot where the chalk writing had appeared. Once I caught him reaching out, fingers hovering just inches from the words, but he pulled back, as if the wall might burn him. Amanda stayed locked in their room, muttering under her breath, anger and terror, twisting together. Through the thin walls I caught fragments not leaving. This house. Mine now. Her determination sounded less like victory and more like desperation. By the next morning, the air between them had curdled. David's voice was frayed, Amanda's sharp and cutting. Every small thing became a fight, whether to make breakfast, whether to open the curtains, whether to answer the phone. The cracks were widening, and there was nothing they could plaster over them with. At the kitchen table, David's voice finally broke. "I can't do this anymore. I can't fight both you and this house." His eyes flicked to me, then quickly away. "And maybe Maybe I don't want to. Amanda slammed her mug down so hard the handle snapped clean off. Coffee splashed across the table, dark and spreading like a wound. "You're weak," she hissed, just like him. Her words hung heavy, cruel, and David's face crumpled at the insult. He didn't answer. He only rose from the table and walked out into the yard, his shoulders hunched, his head bowed, as if the weight of two worlds pressed down on him. I stayed in the doorway, watching him from a distance. He didn't see me, but I saw the truth settling into him at last. The house was winning. And it wasn't done yet. The air inside the house had grown heavier with each passing night. You could almost taste it like damp stone after a rainstorm or iron on the tongue. No one said it aloud, but we all knew something was gathering, pressing closer. Amanda tried to carry on as if nothing had changed. She dressed up for breakfast, put on lipstick at the kitchen mirror, straightened the curtains like a proud hostess. But her hands shook when she poured the coffee, and her eyes flicked constantly toward the hallway mirror by the living room. That mirror had always been Mary's. She'd picked it up at a flea market one summer, swearing she could polish it until the glass sang with light. I remembered watching her reflection every morning as she brushed her silvering hair. Now, though, that mirror no longer gave comfort. It had become a weight in the house, something you couldn't look at too long without feeling watched in return. It happened one evening just as the sun dropped behind the maples. Amanda lingered in the living room, smoothing her blouse, checking her face. David sat nearby, leafing through a newspaper without reading a word. Amanda leaned toward the mirror. At first, she only fixed her lipstick, her expression pinched with tension. Then her body went rigid. She gasped, dropping the tube onto the carpet. "David?" She whispered, her voice hollow. "Do you see her?" David looked up, frowning. "See who?" Amanda's hand lifted slowly, trembling as it pointed toward the mirror. David followed her gaze. His face went pale, his eyes wide. I had stepped into the doorway by then, just far enough to see the glass. And there she was. Mary. Her figure wasn't sharp like flesh and blood, but blurred at the edges like fog rolling through a window pane. Her hair was silver, cascading over her shoulders, her eyes deep and knowing locked on Amanda. And though the mouth never moved, I felt the words as clearly as if spoken aloud. "You don't belong here." Amanda screamed and staggered backward, tripping over the rug. She fell to the floor, clawing at the carpet as if she could crawl away from what she had seen. David rose to his feet, knocking over the chair. His voice cracked, breaking apart as it left him. "Oh, God. Oh, God, I see her too." Amanda scrambled to her feet, tears streaking her face. "Get her out of here! Make her go away!" But the figure in the mirror did not fade. If anything, Mary's presence seemed stronger, the outline of her hand pressed flat against the inside of the glass. Her silver hair framed her face the same way I had seen it in life, calm and resolute. David clutched his head with both hands, pacing in circles. "It's real. It's real." All this time his voice broke again. "I thought it was just noises. Tricks. But it's her. It's her." Amanda screamed once more and fled from the room, nearly colliding with the doorway. David followed, his breath ragged, his composure shattered. I stayed behind a moment longer, watching the glass. Mary's image lingered, then slowly dissolved, leaving only my reflection staring back at me. For the first time in years, I felt her closer than ever, present, protective, fierce. My promise had not been forgotten, and neither had hers. When I turned toward the hallway, Amanda and David were already rushing to the porch, calling my name, voices frantic and desperate. By the time I stepped out onto the porch, they were already there, Amanda clutching David's arm so tightly she left red marks, David's face pale and broken. Their voices tumbled over each other, frantic, desperate. "You saw it, didn't you?" Amanda gasped. "Tell us what it was," David's voice cracked. "Dad, I can't explain it. I can't." He dragged his hands down his face. "It's her. It's Mom. She was in the mirror." The evening air was cool, cicadas humming in the trees, but their panic made the world sharp and brittle. I lowered myself into the rocking chair on the porch, the same one where Mary used to sit with a glass of iced tea in summer. The chair creaked softly as I leaned back, calm against their storm. "I told you once," I said, my voice even. "This house remembers." Amanda's eyes flared. "Don't talk in riddles. We need help. Whatever is happening, it's not normal. You've lived here all these years. You must know how to stop it. I studied her, the desperation burning through her fear. Behind her bravado was a woman who finally realized she couldn't bend this house to her will. Stop it, I repeated quietly. Why would I stop it? This house is hers. She made me promise. Amanda recoiled as if I'd struck her. You're insane, she spat. You wanted this. You let it happen to us. David stood between us, torn, his voice raw. Dad, please. I don't know what's real anymore, but I saw her. I can't deny that. What do we do? I looked at him, then really looked at my son. His face etched with sleepless nights and unspoken guilt was not the boy I raised, but a man trapped in chains of his own making. I let the silence hang long enough for him to feel its weight. What you do, I said, finally depends on whether you remember who this house belongs to. It was never meant for strangers. And you've invited strangers in. Amanda shook her head violently. We're not strangers. We're family now. The rocking chair creaked again as I leaned forward. Family is earned, Amanda, not claimed. Her face twisted fury, clashing with fear. She wanted to fight, but the memory of Mary's silver hair in that mirror held her tongue. David pressed his palms together, his voice barely more than a whisper. She looked at me. I swear she looked right through me. She did, I said simply. The porch light flickered, then buzzing before steadying again. Amanda whimpered, clutching David tighter. He didn't push her away this time, but he didn't comfort her either. I can't live like this, Amanda cried. Every corner, every sound, I can't breathe in that house. Then don't, I said, my tone calm but final. No one is keeping you here. David looked at me, torn open, searching for something in my eyes. And if we leave, I let out a long breath, the kind that carried years of sorrow and resolve. Then she'll rest, and so will I. For a long while, none of us spoke. Only the hum of cicadas filled the night, and the slow rhythm of the rocking chair moving back and forth. I could see it now. David's shoulders sagging under the truth, Amanda trembling, with the realization that her willpower was no match for the spirit of a woman who had loved this house more deeply than they ever could. They followed me back into the house with the hesitance of people entering a church they didn't believe in. Their feet dragged, their eyes darted to every shadow, every groan of the old wood. Amanda clung to David, whispering sharp little prayers under her breath. David looked hollowed out, like he'd left part of himself out there on the porch. I didn't speak as I led them down the narrow hallway. The house had gone quiet again, the kind of silence that pressed against your eardrums. When I stopped in front of the panel at the end of the hall, Amanda let out a nervous laugh. There's nothing here, she said, her voice brittle. Just a wall. I slid my hand along the molding fingers, finding the groove I knew by heart. With a gentle push, the panel gave way, swinging open with a sigh of wood and dust. A hidden room, dark and waiting. Amanda gasped. David stepped back, eyes wide. I reached inside and pulled the cord. A bare bulb flickered to life, spilling pale yellow light into the small space. The room was no bigger than a pantry, but every inch was filled with her. Mary's photograph sat framed on the far wall, the one I'd taken the spring before she passed. Her silver hair gleamed, her smile soft but unshakable. Beneath it, pinned carefully to the wall, was the piece of paper she had made me sign the night before she died. The words written in her hand still cut into me. No one will ever replace you in this home. Amanda drew in a sharp breath. This is insane. David stepped closer, his voice breaking. Dad, I should have known. I should have asked. Why didn't you ever tell me? I didn't answer right away. My eyes traced Mary's face, the corners of her smile that still seemed to hold me steady. Finally, I spoke. Because it wasn't for you to know. It was for me to keep, and for the house to guard. As if on cue, a soft thump sounded from the shelf. A worn leather journal slipped off the edge and landed open on the floor. The pages fluttered, stopping at one filled with Mary's handwriting. David bent down, picking it up with trembling hands. He read aloud, his voice cracking with every word. I love this house because it holds our laughter, our tears, our children's first steps. It is our promise, made solid brick by brick. It will always be us. His knees buckled and he lowered himself to the floor, clutching the journal to his chest. His sobs filled the small room, the sound of a man who finally understood what he had traded away. Amanda hovered at the doorway, her face pale, her eyes darting to the photo, the paper, the journal. This doesn't prove anything, she whispered, but even she didn't believe her own words. Her voice trembled, her defiance faltering. I turned to her. My voice was steady, quiet, but it carried the weight of years. This house does not welcome strangers. Amanda flinched to her chin, trembling. For once she had no sharp words, no victory to cling to. The walls themselves seemed to breathe against her, reminding her she didn't belong. David looked up at me. Then his face streaked with tears. Please, Dad. Forgive me. I stared at him, at the boy who had once run these halls with scraped knees and a wide grin, now a man bowed under the weight of his own choices. My chest ached with the pull of love and betrayal. I let out a long breath, the kind that seemed to scrape through my ribs on the way out. My answer came slowly, heavy as stone. Forgiveness. I said, my voice quiet but unyielding, is not mine to give. It belongs to her. David's face crumpled. Amanda's knees wobbled. The air in the hidden room grew thick, the bulb flickering overhead. The silence inside that room was unbearable. Dust floated in the thin light from the bulb, settling on Mary's photograph on the paper pinned to the wall on David's trembling shoulders. Amanda's shallow breaths echoed off the plaster. David wiped his face with the back of his hand. His eyes were swollen, his voice ragged. I thought I was protecting my family, he whispered. I thought giving them this house meant I was moving forward, building something new. But all I did was break what was already sacred. He closed the journal, gently laying it on the floor like a relic. Dad, I betrayed both of you. I wanted to tell him he was right. I wanted to shout at him for being blind, for letting Amanda's ambition guide his hand. But the anger had burned itself out long ago, leaving only the dull ache of disappointment. You didn't just betray us, I said quietly. You betrayed yourself. This house was your foundation, and you tried to cut it away. David's shoulders sagged. He didn't argue. For once he had nothing left to defend himself with. Amanda, though, wasn't ready to yield. She stepped into the room at last, arms crossed, tightly, chin raised in defiance. This is ridiculous. All of it. A photograph, an old note, some scribbles in a journal. This is what's supposed to scare us. Houses don't have memories. The dead don't write on walls. Her words came sharp, but her eyes betrayed her. They darted to the chalky writing still faintly visible on the hallway plaster. They lingered on Mary's picture longer than she intended. This house is more alive than you'll ever admit, I told her. Amanda shook her head, forcing out a laugh that cracked halfway through. No. No, I won't let some ghost story decide my life. This house is ours now. People in town will see that. They'll know it. Her voice grew louder, frantic, as if volume alone could make it true. But then, as if answering her, the bulb above us flickered. A cold draft swept through the hidden room, carrying the faintest scent of lilacs, the perfume Mary used to wear on Sundays. Amanda froze. Her bravado drained away in an instant. David, she whispered, her voice shaking, did you smell that? He nodded slowly, tears shining again. Mom? Amanda stumbled back, clutching the doorframe for balance. Her face twisted, fear breaking through the last of her pride. We have to leave. Tonight. I can't. David turned to me, his voice steady for the first time in days. She's right. We don't belong here. Not like this. Dad, I can't undo what I did, but I can leave. If that's what it takes for Mom to rest, for you to have peace. For a moment I saw the boy he had once been, earnest, broken, but finally honest. Amanda pulled at his sleeve, desperate. David, think about what we're giving up. The house, the standing, everything. He cut her off with a sharp shake of his head. None of it matters. Not anymore. I've seen her. I can't deny her. This house isn't ours. It never was. Amanda's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. The silence that followed crushed her protests better than anything I could have said. David faced me, then tears brimming once more. I can't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But please, Dad, please believe that I see now. I understand. I looked at him a long while, at the man who had once been my son, now humbled by the weight of his choices. The rocking in my chest was not triumph, not vengeance, but sorrow, heavy as stone. Finally I spoke. Forgiveness is not mine to give. It belongs to her. The bulb above us dimmed, then steadied. The faint scent of lilacs drifted once more before fading away. Amanda pressed her face into David's shoulder, trembling. David bowed his head, clutching her with one arm, the journal with the other. I stepped back from the room, leaving them there, with the silence, with the truth. The house had spoken, and nothing they said could undo it. Word spreads quickly in a small town. You can't keep a secret long, not when neighbors wave from their porches and the grocery clerk has known your family for decades. By the time Sunday rolled around, whispers about the house, my house, had already made their way through pews, potluck lines, and coffee cups at the diner. They called it strange, some even called it haunted. But more than anything, they called it justice. I didn't go to church that morning to hide what happened. I went because I'd promised Mary that no matter what storm we faced, we would always keep faith. I walked in with my cane slow but steady and heads turned. Some nodded quietly as if to say they'd heard enough to believe. Others avoided my eyes, unsettled by the stories. After service, Pastor Green put a hand on my shoulder. "Walter," he said gently, "folks are talking. They say your Mary hasn't left that house." I looked him square in the eye. "She hasn't. Not in the way they think. She's still protecting what was hers. What was ours." His brow furrowed, but he didn't argue. In fact, he gave a small nod like he understood more than he let on. That evening, neighbors began stopping by. Some brought pies, others just curiosity. Mrs. Haskins from down the street leaned close and whispered, "I always knew that place had a spirit about it. Now folks are calling it the House of Eternal Love." The phrase stuck. Within days, it wasn't just neighbors, it was half the town. The grocery store bag boy repeated it when he carried my milk out to the car. A group of teenagers at the diner dared each other to walk past at night. Even at bingo on Tuesday, I overheard the whispers, "Respect the house. Respect the love." Amanda, meanwhile, couldn't show her face. The same people who once nodded politely at her in the church vestibule now crossed the street when they saw her coming. She tried to brush it off, chin held high, but the sting showed in her eyes. Her parents packed up within the week, shame written plain as day on their faces. They didn't so much as say goodbye. David stayed quiet. He came by once, standing on the porch where Mary used to plant geraniums. His eyes were tired, shoulders heavy. "Daddy said the town won't forget. They look at me like I'm the one who betrayed them all." "You didn't betray them," I answered. "You betrayed yourself, and you betrayed your mother." He winced like the words were stones thrown against his chest. "I don't know if I'll ever crawl out from under it." "That's not for me to decide," I told him. "Justice has already been served in ways beyond this world. The rest is on you." That night I sat at Mary's old vanity, her picture propped against the mirror. The candlelight flickered and I spoke softly. "Justice has been served, Mary, in ways no court or lawyer could ever manage." The house groaned quietly in reply, as if the beams themselves remembered. Days stretched into weeks, and still the story grew. Children whispered it like a ghost tale, but older folks spoke of it like scripture. At the diner, a man tapped his coffee mug and said, "That's what happens when you forget respect. The living, the dead, they're tied together." That house remembered, and I, sitting there, could only nod. Because for once, the gossip carried truth. By the time another week passed, the story was no longer mine alone. It belonged to the town. At the diner, the waitress refilled my coffee and whispered, "You gave us all something to think about, Walter. We forget too easy that houses hold more than furniture." Even Pastor Green, cautious as he usually was, chose to speak of it during Sunday service. He didn't name me directly, but everyone knew. He stood at the pulpit and said, "A home is not just wood and stone. It carries the weight of promises, the memory of love, and the truth that betrayal leaves behind. Respect, the living honor the dead, or the house itself will remember." The congregation sat in silence, some nodding, others clutching their hymnals, as if they too felt the weight of his words. Amanda stopped showing up at church. Word had it, she couldn't bear the sideways glances, the whispers that followed her down the aisles at the grocery store. Her pride had been her armor, but even armor rusts when soaked in shame. Her parents left quietly, retreating to a cousin's house 2 counties away. No one asked them to return. David tried in his way to mend what he had torn. He stopped by with groceries, sometimes fixing a loose shutter or raking leaves without asking. His eyes always carried that same apology, unspoken but heavy. I never pushed him away, but I didn't let him forget either. "Forgiveness is not mine to give," I had told him. It belongs to her. And every time I repeated those words in my mind, I felt Mary's presence steady beside me. The town had already decided where the real blame lay. At the post office, I overheard one woman say Amanda thought she could take what wasn't hers. Now she's learning some things. You just can't steal. Another replied, that house will always be hers. Eternal love doesn't leave space for greed. One crisp autumn evening, I lit a candle on the mantel beneath Mary's picture. The flame danced softly, casting shadows across the familiar room. I spoke aloud, not caring if anyone heard. Justice has been served, Mary. Not by lawyers or courts, but by truth itself. This house remembered, and so did I. The boards creaked gently, and for a moment I thought I heard the faintest echo of her laughter drifting through the halls. Not haunting, just home. Neighbors began calling it by a name that stuck fast, the House of Eternal Love. Children dared each other to step on the porch, but even in their mischief, there was respect. Adults spoke of it with reverence, almost like a sermon repeated over coffee cups and front porch swings. I didn't ask for the legend, but I accepted it. Because if one story could remind folks that love outlasts betrayal, then maybe Mary and I had done something worth leaving behind. On my last walk through town before winter set in, an old friend stopped me outside the hardware store. He tipped his hat and said, Walter, you've shown us all. Home isn't just where you live, it's who you honor. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box to the right.